Jai Hind viewers, it's my honor today to host Major Gen Sudhakar Jee versus Seva Medal on the candid conversation on global strategic and defense news. General Sudhakar Jee has done the prestigious Defense Services Staff College course from Wellington and the National Defense course from New Delhi. He has been the colonel of the Mahar Regiment for over 3 years and has had varied command, staff, and instructional appointments. The general officer is an avid writer. His articles are published frequently on the print media, and he comes in almost all the leading Indian and international news channels. It is always a privilege listening to General Sudhakar Jee because his views are very clear and very crisp. And I'm really indeed honored that the general officer has agreed to come on my show. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the Candid Conversation.
Good morning, Jacinda. It is equally a very rare pride and distinction for me to be invited by somebody like you. I have also seen you and heard you in the national mainstream channels. Plus, I was recently introduced to your global strategic and defense news analysis through you only. Off and on, I have been perusing the articles and the products you have been taking out, par excellent. And you are one of the best defense analysts and commentator I have come across in my life and service. Thank you so much for inviting me to your channel.
Thank you, sir. So my first question to you is, can you please explain the India-China border dispute along with the date timelines?
Yeah, certainly, Jacinda. Firstly, compliments. Not many people of your caliber would have picked up a theme as relevant and important as this. I must compliment you. The fact that you have picked up the theme clearly indicates that your deep insight into the subject and how it can become a very troublesome challenge for India's national security in times ahead. And compliments to you and get going ahead. To answer your question, firstly, let's understand what is the India-China border. I'm quite conscious of the timeline you've given me. The Indo-China border, let's be very, very clear that India never in the millennia had, till independence, I would say, to large an extent, a border with China. Let's be very, very clear. Aksai Chin that we so often talk about had a border with a call it as a sovereign state or a nation state or some kind of entity known as Turkestan. Turkestan is to be divided into East Turkestan and West Turkestan. It was spilling over towards Kazakhstan side. And what is opposite Aksai Chin is actually Turkestan. Now this, for the viewers to understand, it is very important to get a rough alignment of this particular border. Opposite Mangungso Lake, there is a boundary line between two formations of China. There are two divisions opposite our division there. And this boundary line is roughly along the alignment along which China, post 2020 Galwan incident, has actually activated and made them as places or locations of disputed territory. They have changed the normal or the status quo, calling it as a new normal. This south of this particular line is actually the border with Tibet. North of it is actually the border with Turkestan. Now it is called as Xinjiang province. So if having understood this, the complete border is about 3,488 kilometers long. And this border has been divided into 3 different sectors. We start with the western sector. Western sector is the eastern Ladakh, starting from Karakoram Pass, going right up to Chumar and beyond. Thereafter, we have the Poo sector or the middle sector. This western sector is roughly around 1,500 odd kilometers along the border. I'll not give you the specifics. We'll have a generic kind of an indication from the open source. And middle sector essentially is covering the border with Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. And the eastern sector comprises of Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. Now, out of this complete 3 sectors, in the western sector, that is eastern Ladakh, China, by virtue of the undelineated and undemarcated border, because of many sequence of events which we cannot revoke or Andu, has occupied a rough area of 37,000, we call it a 38,000 square kilometers, part of Aksai chain. In addition to that, roughly around 5,120 square kilometers of Shaksgam Valley, which earlier was part of Jammu Kashmir and occupied by Pakistan illegally, I would say. It was ceded to China in the year 1963, immediately after, I would say, within 1 year of the 1962 operation coming to an end, for whatever reason. And also, let me in the same breath share with the viewers that Shaksgam Valley is known for large number of glaciers. This is the very compact area, very small area, in which there are roughly around 252 glaciers. So that is the relevance. So now, post 2019, 5th of August, abrogation of Article 370, consequent to promulgation of Ladakh as a union territory, to my understanding and analysis, this Shaksgam Valley, which technically speaking is part of J&K, should be part of disputed territory to be resolved with Pakistan, has actually the tables have turned and it becomes an issue which needs to be resolved with China. So as Gilgit and Baltistan. So this has to be understood very clearly. Also, another point I wish to highlight here itself is, see, post 1962 conflict, what had happened was the Chinese had actually come across the Macmo line, which I'll cover a little later, and they had gone back towards the eastern sector. In case of Aksai chain, they did not go back. They stuck to a line up to which they had come and occupied the features or the geographical location. So this is 38,000 square kilometers of Aksai chain, which is disputed in this area. It has got smaller pockets of mutually accepted disputed territory. In addition to the Shaksgam Valley, there are a couple of them. Largest number are here. Largest number of transgressions take place here. And there are far too many lines, which will confuse everyone. So I'll come to the simplistic bare minimum lines as far as description of this particular sector is concerned a little later. As far as the middle sector is concerned, there is a place called Barahuti. In Barahuti, generally Himachal and this Uttarakhand area, there are roughly around 4 places which you can, very tiny places. Otherwise, since it is demarcated with the help of a geographical boundary, that is a watershed, there is a huge ridge line which is demarcating the China and India. There is not much of any dispute. Plus, at the time of some kind of a effort going on between the two countries, China had indicated there are a number of passes, but they don't call it as mountain passes. They call it, these are the passes through which the transit of the commercial activities will take place. They're very, very smart. Now you come to Sikkim and this place, the Arunachal Pradesh. Sikkim, by and large, things are all settled, barring one odd place. And Arunachal Pradesh, which is approximately 90,000 square kilometers, and this area is being claimed by China. Till 2005, they were quiet, but post 2005, something has happened. They have started actually claiming the entire area of 90,000 square kilometers in addition to Aksai chain. So this is as far as the boundary line per se is concerned. Now, if you ask me, the main issue of the contention between the two countries, given the fact that the Macmo line was willy-nilly, it was accepted because China did not exist in 1914. So therefore, although it has been signed by the representative of Tibet, who was detailed by His Holiness Dalai Lama, and it is initialed by the representative of China, still there is some kind of a ready reckoner available. Coming to the most critical sector is the Western sector. Western sector, that is the Aksai chain, it has got different timelines. Now, when I say timelines, this is a sector wherein people must understand that our claim, India's claim, is based on 1842 agreement. There is a treaty which was signed in the year 1842. This treaty is called as the Treaty of Chusul. Now, this treaty, you see, the Sikh Confederacy had invaded Tibet with an army in 1841, and after having annexed Ladakh. Thereafter, there was a treaty mutually. The Tibetans or the Chinese, they came inside, and there was a stalemate. After the stalemate, a treaty was actually promulgated, and that treaty is Treaty of Chasul, based on which there is an agreement between both the stakeholders that neither party will ingress into the other sector and capture. There will be no aggression at all. So after this treaty, there is another thing which took place in 1846, that is the Britishers, they actually defeated the Sikh Confederacy and took over the complete state of Jammu Kashmir. Now, during this phase of 1841-42, and prior to that, 1831 was the real conflict which had taken place. By and by, things were getting stabilized. One important thing which is to be kept in mind is that Minsar is at the base. It is the base of Mount Kailash. This also had been consolidated by the Sikh Confederacy and by the Dogra troops in the battle against the Tibet. Rightfully, I would say that India should actually claim this particular piece of land, which is presently with China. Now, what happened thereafter? I'm just skipping the timelines, coming to the main core issue. The main core issue was in the year 1865. And incidentally, 1842 is not 1842 by itself in isolation. 1842 treaty also, during my research, one thing has come out. It is not there in many books. There is one thing which has come out. 1842 treaty is based on a treaty of Tinmos-Gang of 1684, that was signed between Ladakh and Tibet when both were feudal states, and Ladakh was the hub of trade routes into Turkestan and Tibet. This has to be kept in mind, historical legacy. In the year 1865, this is very important, ladies and gentlemen, this has to be understood clearly, that there is some gentleman by the name of W.H. Johnson. He was a geographer, and he was part of the British India Empire in the Survey of India organization. This man, he had been given the task to actually map the complete boundary of Jammu Kashmir. He had gone up to Aksai Chin. He had gone up to going by the geographical features existing between Karakoram Pass and Pangong Tso. He had selected a line of the watershed line of Yarkand, and there are a couple of other rivers. Now, as per him, he had selected the Kulnul Mountains. Now, Kulnul Mountain, rough alignment, is actually the northeastern extreme boundary. That was the southern boundary of China at that point in time. China, who used to be called as Qing dynasty at that point in time. So therefore, this line became the first line which had been proposed by Johnson. We'll not go into the intricacies. It was rejected outrightly by the Britishers. They criticized him, and China did not have Xinjiang that time. So whatever proposal was given, Maharaja of Jammu Kashmir had 18,000 all square kilometers from this area. However, the geographical line was registered by multiple stakeholders at different levels, notwithstanding the criticism this gentleman actually got for himself. Immediately after that, another line which actually came into being or got highlighted because of some gentleman by the name of Major General Ardag. Major General Ardag, what he did, he actually highlighted in 1897, he was the military officer, he proposed a boundary along the crest of Kulnun Mountains, nothing different from Johnson Line, crest of Kulnun Mountains, and north of Yarkand River. At the time, the Britain was actually concerned at the danger of Russian expansion. China was weakened, and Ardag argued that this line was more defendable, and effectively it was a modification of Johnson Line. After this, very interesting thing took place. There are many lines. One line is the Foreign Office line, which is 1873. I don't want to confuse the viewers. These are all important landmarks and the milestones. The Macartney and MacDonald line. In the year 1893, this must be understood that there is a gentleman by the name of Hung Ta Chen. Hung Ta Chen was a senior Chinese official at Kashgar. Mind you, at Kashgar, we had a consulate general, British India Empire. They had to be pulled back. So this gentleman, he handed over a map of the boundary proposed by China to George Macartney. This generally, most of us actually don't know all these details. The British, who was George Macartney? George Macartney was the British Consul General at Kashgar. Now, this boundary placed Lingji Tang Plains. I'll not go into too many landmarks, it will confuse. Basically, this is a kind of a line. It is on a medium path. It follows the rough alignment of I would say, Karakoram range. So to the northeast, farthest point is the Kunlun Mountains. South of it is Karakoram range. So along the Karakoram range mountains, this proposal was given by him, McCartney, and the British government, they agreed to it. After they agreed, so what happened was McCartney sent this to British Indian government. This was actually accepted by the decision makers in the hierarchy. And this particular proposal of 1893 was finally accepted in the year 1899, because that is the year when the British Empire had a military officer in the diplomatic role at Beijing. In Beijing, he MacDonald is his name. He actually handed over this particular proposal or the map with a note to Chinese, but Chinese never replied back to him. So when the Chinese did not reply, because of the silence, it was taken as acquiescence, and this particular line was taken as a middle path acceptable to China, because the proposal had been mooted by China. And immediately after that, there were a lot of flip-flop which took place. Why flip-flop took place? Because the Russians were at times, they were seen across the Kunlun Mountains, at times Karakoram, and getting closer to Indian subcontinent. So that is the time the British, they used to have knee-jerk response, and they used to push back the line. While this particular McCartney line had been given in proposal, but it was not promulgated anywhere officially. So therefore, the ambiguity lasted. And in addition to all this, ladies and gentlemen, it should be relevant, I must share, that while all these efforts were going on from the British side to go into delineate the map and demarcate the boundary, but nothing fructified on ground, somehow, when you claim a particular line, it is incumbent on part of the claimant to actually have presence of some kind of a troops or some kind of resources to dominate the area. That this particular activity was not done by the Britishers. So by and by the time passed, I'll skip the timeline. There is an important timeline which people must understand is from 1917 to 1933. These couple of years, around 16 odd years. It is very interesting to actually bear in mind that that line of Johnson, that is the Kunlun Mountain, in the postal stamp of Chinese, this was shown along the Kunlun Mountains. So China, having shown it along the Kunlun Mountains, they actually do not have any logic or any argument to actually, keep it open-ended or fall back to Karakoram range, which they're occupying today. So these are the few important lines I thought I must share. And also in mind, you must keep in mind that in 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru will not go into the history and the dynamics as to what compelled him. There is a rationale, there is a logic as to what he did, why he did what he did. I'll not go into that. From 47 to 1954, it carried on a lot of flip-flop. There is a time frame of 1950 through 54. For about a year, we showed this particular area, Aksai chain, with color wash. Color wash is a method to actually, you being a sapper officer, you will understand whichever area is ambiguous, you actually use the color wash. Subsequently, prior to Survey of India, taking out the form and final kind of a map with very defined kind of boundary, there was a time when they started endorsing a remark called undefined boundaries. So here itself, I would like to clarify, Britishers, they played a very smart game. They defined the boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan or India along the Durand line. This was defined right up to Karakoram Pass. Karakoram Pass, as on today, way back in 1892, I remember correctly, yes, 1892, they had demarcated a particular marker. A marker, it actually comprises of human skulls, animal skulls. That marker is still existing, which was accepted by China as also by India. And they had not demarcated this Aksai chain area. Now, what is Aksai chain? A lot of people should come to know. This is not there in many books. I have read around 10 odd books. Aksai chain is the area which is defined between, roughly, between Kunlun Mountain and the Karakoram range. And it is through this area that 107 demarcation is concerned. The line drawn was with a thick sketch pen on a quarter-inch map or smaller than quarter-inch map. Unfortunately, instead of following the alignment of Thagla Ridge is actually Namkachu, Thagla Ridge, Jimitang sector in Tawang, Kameng sector. That line actually followed a line joining the Hathonga Ridge. Hathonga Ridge is towards India side. It's a crow-flight distance of 10 to 18 kilometers. This became a crucial, actually, I would say, a line of ambiguity, which perhaps triggered the conflict of 1962. Had the lines been actually demarcated correctly by the people who mattered, while this particular agreement was taken as agreement of sanctity based on which the map survey of India took out in 1954, perhaps 1962 wouldn't have taken place. Because for a soldier on ground, what matters is what is there on paper. And therefore, here he takes that as a reference point. Somehow it did not happen. So that is why this particular major issue is still standing as a pending issue to be resolved. In addition to a couple of other mutually agreed disputed areas, there are very, very few of them in comparison to the Eastern Ladakh. I hope I have been able to answer the question as far as the boundary lines are concerned.
Thank you very much, sir. It was very interesting and very informative. And I myself learned a lot from listening to you. So my next question to you is, why is Depsang and Demchok so important to China? And why haven't these two issues been resolved till date?
Jacinder, I must compliment you that you have picked up out of so many questions floating around in the environment. These two questions actually will give out answers to many questions, many issues between India and China. You see, while responding to this particular question per se, I would say I would like to tackle this in three different levels. One is at the strategic level. One could be the operational level, and one could be at the tactical level. At strategic level, for lack of correct expression and usage of terminology, let's call it at strategic level. Let's take our mind back to 1949. In the year 1949, 1st of October, the PRC, People's Republic of China, was raised officially. When it was raised, China is not what it is today. The Xinjiang province, which earlier, to your previous question while answering, used to be called as Turkestan. So they had sent much before the raising of the PRC. PRC was raised on 1st of October 1949. Sometime in August, they had sent around 70,000 armed troops to invade into Xinjiang province and annex Xinjiang province. Xinjiang province was annexed sometime in 1951. Okay, 50. But alongside, what had happened was preparation was going on for annexing Tibet. These were Tibet was an independent state. So by virtue of many historical developments, which will take a lot of time, since time is at premium, I would say they annexed Tibet by 23rd of May 1951. There was an agreement signed with the Tibetans. It's called a 17th Principle Agreement. This agreement spoke about non-interference, then respect for each other's territory, sovereignty, etc., giving them protection for their religion and respect for the religion, a host of other issues. And this was supposed to last for 60 years. I think it finished in 2011, most probably. So after they actually carried out genocide, I would say. Nobody is talking about it. When they invaded Tibet, Tibet was invaded from different directions. Okay, so what I am trying to bring out is that in addition, there are many sensitivities in China. Inner Mongolia was never part of China. Manchuria was never part of China. China was only the Han Chinese, which is, I would say, 600 kilometers from the east coast. There is a line known as 15-inch isoheight. 15-inch isoheight line is the line which actually divides. East of it, it receives copious rainfall, substantive rainfall. There's a 15-inch rainfall. But west of it, it doesn't get much of rainfall. It's all arid and kind of a dry desert. So east of this area is the area where there is a narrow strip along the east coast where you have almost about 94% of the Chinese population are residing there. You have 90% or more industries located here. You have almost about 80 to 85% of its combat resources, armored resources. Out of 85, the CAB they call it, earlier they used to call it division, almost about 75 divisions or equivalent are actually biased. They're deployed towards this. They have got 20-25 odd divisions of maybe 15-20 divisions towards the Western theater recently, which are actually responsible for the border. So what I'm coming to is the strategic level. Xinjiang and Tibet are huge sensitivities as far as China is concerned. So when you talk about Xinjiang and Tibet, I have told you the rough alignment dividing these two autonomous regions are generally north of Pangong Tso and the points which they have activated post Galwan incident. You say PP-15, you have Gogra, you have north bank of Pangong Tso, etc., etc. This is the rough alignment. Now, what does it indicate? What does it say? North of it is the area Depsang. Now, Depsang bulge, what does it mean? You see, by and by, between 2001 and 2019, India, with great amount of effort, and particularly the present dispensation, we are all military people, we are apolitical, we must compliment the government, present government. They have given a push. This road was completed in the year 2019 after having come to grinding halt thrice. In 2019, this DSDBO road, which is approximately 250 kilometers long, which starts from Durbuk, goes up to DBO, has been connected. Now, this has given nightmares to Chinese. Why? Because ahead of north of Karakoram Pass, at a distance of 90 odd kilometers, is Zaidullah. Zaidullah earlier, the Dogra king, the Jammu Kashmir king, like I had told you, he had constructed a fort there. Now it is under China. So there is Kashgar is approximately 700 kilometers north of Karakoram Pass, roughly. I'm saying northeast around that. So there is a rough alignment of Karakoram Road, which is connecting between Kashgar, Zaidullah, and cuts across the Gilgit-Baltistan. And same Karakoram Road is the backbone of Sikh Pack of China. So when this road was completed, this has come about, it is posing a huge threat to this Karakoram axis. This is number one issue. Second issue we must understand is that way back in 50s, they started constructing the Western Highway, call it G219. This Western Highway was roughly going along, for lack of legal and correct expression, I'll use that LAC, line of actual control, to their part, northern portion of China. It was following this rough alignment. It was connecting Lhasa with Kashgar, that is Xinjiang province with Tibet. Roughly around distance was 3,000 some kilometers, roughly. And this was cutting across the northeast portion of Aksai Chin. The portion which is cutting across northeast portion is 179 kilometers. So the road which is passing from Durbuk to DBO, this is very close to the line of actual control, posing threat that we may be able to, during time of conflict, we may be able to interdict the alignment of this G219, which is at a distance between 25 to 200 kilometers, 175 to 200 kilometers. This is one part. Second part is why Demchok? Demchok is basically, again, the same issue. The Western Highway is very close to our area of responsibility. They are trying to give some kind of a depth to this particular area, and it's 150 square kilometer of area of dispute. They are trying to say that the alignment of the future boundary should be towards India's side, giving them this particular elbow space so as to provide a kind of a depth to the existing axis. Otherwise, it is most vulnerable to be cut off by our forces. Hope I have answered you.
Thank you, sir. So my last question to you is it correct to say that after the 1962, China has not occupied an inch of the Indian territory?
Look, Jacinda, again, very interesting question. We should be very clear. As on today, technically speaking, legally speaking, there is no delineated and demarcated boundary between India and China. So since there is no demarcated line between India, it is all dependent on our perception and their perception. Even if they may have come across to our side, it is based on our perceived line, which may not be applicable to them. For them, they say they are in their side. For us, we say they have come into our side. So to answer your question in a most practical form, for our layman understanding, going by this perceived line, undemarcated, undeleted line, one is the Depsang bulge, which we have spoken of, around 952 square kilometers. The second could be, you could take this Demchok, which they're claiming 150 square kilometers, but they have come across a nala. It is called as charging nala. They have pitched up a tent, which they had pitched up in the year 2014. Third, I would say Wangdong. Again, it is as per the perception. Wangdong, they have crossed the water or the watershed or the ridge line, and they are towards to the reverse slope of the feature on which our troops are deployed. And these are the couple of these points. Otherwise, I would say in the year 1993, the first agreement of border peace treaty agreement was signed. Border protocol or peace treaty agreement was signed by Narasimha Rao. This agreement is based on the very concept of line of actual control. Since we have accepted line of actual control, subsequent agreements, 1996, 2005, 2012, 2013, all the agreements that have been signed, it has actually nullified the stance and the standpoint of India, which Jawaharlal Nehru had taken way back in 1959 or 60. I hope I have been able to answer your question.
Thank you so much, sir. It was very educative and engrossing listening to you. And I'm sure that our viewers would have benefited a lot. Thank you once again, sir, for honoring me by coming on my show.
Thank you, Jacinda. Always a pleasure, great honor. Maybe we look forward to future engagements. Couple of issues which may have actually left out because of paucity of time, we can address them later. Thank you so much, Jacinda.